Punching Nazis or slapping Cthulhu is maybe what we're going to be looking at in my review today. Today, I'm going to take a look at Achtung Cthulhu, a book that, well, it's been out for quite a while now, but it was kind of off my radar because I had the Savage Worlds version of it. But with the release of Cohorts Cthulhu, and then I picked that up because of the Roman theme. At the expo, I was talking to Modiphius, and they told me that Achtung Cthulhu is exactly the same world as Cohorts. So I had an idea. Let's create a character in Achtung and move them back to Cohorts, or move them future to the other way around. So I then needed to go and buy a load of Call of Cthulhu, well, Achtung Cthulhu books, and it's about her. I'm actually surprised just how good this is, and it's kind of annoyed me that I've avoided having this now for several years. And there is a chunk of me that hasn't overly liked Modiphius' 2D20 system. So again, it was another obstacle to get this book to the table, or even want to read it, and from playing Fallout and Sentience. And now it's actually heading to be one of my favourite systems to play and to run. So let's stop wasting some time. Let's just jump into Achtung Cthulhu. I'm going to be looking today at the Player's Guide. I will do a follow-up with the Games Master's Guide. I'm going to be looking at the starter set as well, and probably some of the adventures. And then I'm going to move on to Cthulhu Cohorts, which is the sort of Roman-based one. May juggle around the order, I don't really know. It depends on what takes my fancy. But yeah, this book is available, so you need the Player's Guide to pretty much run the game and create characters for the players. And again, the Dungeons Master's Guide, as it sounds, it tends to do all the world building. This section, nearly, is where I would jump onto a website and show you where you can buy it. This isn't available for pre-order. You can pick this up. You can pick this up. You can pick this up pretty much anywhere. So I'm just going to jump straight into the rule book. And as I do, it's just going to go through the book, talk about what I like about it. There are a couple of annoyances and sort of homebrew stuff that I tend to do with this 2D20 system, but I'll get into that when we get into the book. So here we have the front cover and the inside of the book, and you can see from outset, this is more than just Second World War Call of Cthulhu. This is a pulp game, so the players are going to be able to do some more sort of fantastical things than just a sort of your average Joe soldier. And this is also shown as issue number 1, and I think you'll agree, this is actually some tremendous artwork. Throughout the book, well, actually, the whole theme of the Achtung Cthulhu books are really, really, really good imageries. And, you know, the artist it's just amazing. I really like what I'm seeing in this book. So here we've got, so we'll just get into the book now. So here we've got Achtung Cthulhu, created by Chris Birch. Lead designers down here, then a lot of people and thanks and editors, graphic designers is all in there. So on the right hand side here, we've got the contents for the book that sadly isn't hyperlinked. But we have got, 11 chapters to get through then, and appendix. Chapter 1 is the introduction to the world. Chapter 2 covers the secret wars. Very, very small chapter this, because most of the data on all the factions, and well, the information on all the factions is actually in the Games Master's Guide. That's, I think it's about 280 pages. This comes in at 191. We'll then get into playing the game, how the skills work and tests, etc. Then how action and fighting works. Beyond that, we're then just creating characters. Chapter 5 is character creation, your talents or feats, tools of the trade, so this is equipment. Because this is a Cthulhu-esque world, there is magic, and we've got 3 different types of magic to come through, with 2 really interesting schools and then a really good school. And I'll show, I mean, well, the 2 of the schools really interest me, and I will explain that once we get to the magic section. We've then got the sort of Cthulhu modern, tongue-in-cheek, condensed history here, and then details of some of the armed forces, so some sort of British soldiers, some US soldiers, and a bunch of animals, and then character sheet and index at the back. So chapter 1, the introduction. So this is a story that you can just read in your own time. It sort of builds what we're doing, but I'll kind of just summarise the world. So the Second World War is plodding on as normal, and I don't really need to explain the Second World War in here, but the Secret War, or the War in Shadows, is it? So basically, Nazi Germany discovered Cthulhu mythos and started using spells against the Allies. The allies then basically had to create their own division, so Division M here, to go and learn spells and take sort of magical items and mythos items to fight against the Nazis. That's it. You are the player characters working for them or being introduced to them. Okay, that's your setting here. The 2d20 system, I'll actually explain that when we get into it, but this is just a brief sort of explanation of the world. And then we've got, this is quite a nice little bit, so these are just notice boards really, and details here about Section M, the Majestic, Black Sun, Nacht Wolf, and Migo, and the Deep Ones. And these are just sort of 6 factions in the game, which I'll leave you to read them yourself. Some of the documents are a little bit redacted, but you can kind of really build on the world. But there is a little, actually I should have said, just going back here, it does say that if you want your player characters to not actually know what's going on, and I think that isn't a bad way to start. If you want to go in with that, just skip past it and go straight to chapter 3. So chapter 3, this is the chapter where we're going to just sit and go through the core mechanics of this game. And in this game, you're going to need d20s up to 5 and sort of 6 or 7 d6. Yes, you can buy these sort of funky d6, but if you haven't got the funky d6, which are all designed to do in damage or stress, as it's called in this game, you so a 1 and 2 would be either 1 or 2 damage, a 3 and a 4 is no damage, and then the 5 or 6 will have this little sort of skull element to it on here, which will do 1 damage plus an effect on the weapons. And d20, you're looking to roll under. That's it with the skills. Every skill roll, you roll a minimum of 2d20, and you can do certain game mechanics to roll up to a maximum of 5. But testing, it's different to some other games, because some games, I think people as a general rule are aware of roll d20 add. This is different. You're rolling 2d20, you're taking your attribute and your skill, and you're looking to roll equal to or less than the combined total of the 2 of them. And because you got a minimum of 2 dice, you could have 4 successes off the 2 dice. So what you're looking to do is achieve a number of successes. So each die that you roll equal to or less than is 1 success. The reason you can have multiple successes, if you roll a 1, it's a crit, counts as 2 successes. And if you roll a 20, it is a complication. So you can still succeed, but something bad might happen. Again, we'll come into that as the mechanics as we go on. That is the core mechanics of the game. We've got examples of difficulties here. So some rolls you might need no successes, or you can go all the way up to 5. And how are you going to get 5 off 2 dice? You can't. What it means is you can buy additional dice or use equipment to give you the games master more dice, or the players more dice. Actually, the games master's still going to need a number of successes too. But also, it's got a result here. Why would you make a roll for when sort of difficulty is 0, so they don't need any successes at all? And that is because the game builds what's called momentum. But we'll come on to that as we get to it, okay? You can help out each of the characters, which may add or decrease dice rolls. Opposed rolls, exactly how they sound. You know, you're both going to need to achieve at least 1. And you knock off each other's successes. So if someone rolls 2, the other person rolls 1. The person that rolls the highest is going to win. You've got extended tests, so if you're trying to break down a door or hack into a computer, something like that, you might need a number of successes. So you would just keep doing the extended tests until they go through. Momentum is what we just talked about. So momentum is a in-game currency, meta currency, as you could say, that allows the game to become very pulpy, because it does allow players to do exceptional things. And you can spend this currency to add additional dice to the rolls. You can create a truth, which is just a keyword that will make the players better or worse, and the NPCs technically, but because the games master can do it as well. But they have what's called threat. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Okay, so what we need to do then is just spend a little bit of time talking about momentum, which is the in-game currency or meta currency that's in Achtung Cthulhu. Now, this is a meta currency. The maximum the players can ever have is 6. Okay, so just bear that in mind. But this is why you would roll potentially a 0, because if you roll additional successes than you need, the additional successes are then saved up and become momentum that the next player can then use. And what you can spend this on, the examples are here, but it's things like you can buy additional d20s, so as opposed to having 2, you can upgrade to 3, 4 or 5, depending on how much momentum that you've got to spend. You can create an additional truth. I'll come on to truths when we get to it. Attain some information or do a job or hack a computer quicker, so you can reduce times down. The Games Master, on the flip side, because momentum sounds quite powerful, the Games Master gets what's called threat, and it works in technically the same way. The Games Master can build up an amount of threat, like the players can build up momentum, and they too can then spend that meta currency to break rules, as additional dice, put truths onto player characters, etc. Okay. Truths and complications. This is a truth is, I don't like the word, well, I don't dislike the word truth, but in this setting, it's like, well, what does truth mean? But truth is effectively a keyword that you attach to a player or a situation, mostly a player, that can either reduce the difficulty by 1 or increase the difficulty by 1. So, for example, you might have sharpshooter as the truth. And when he's making a shot, you can actually get the player will go, do you know, I've got sharpshooter as a truth. So, therefore, I think I should be able to reduce the difficulty by 1. So, it might normally have been a 3 difficulties, meaning they need 3 successes. But they could use that truth to reduce it down to only needing 2. Okay. That, in essence, a truth, except Games Masters can put it onto them as well. Complications, this is exactly how it sounds. This is something that is complicating normally the success. So if a player character rolls a natural 20, sometimes it actually can be lower, which we'll come on to in a second. But what it basically means is, let's say you're shooting and you roll 2 successes. So you roll a 1 and a 20 off the 2 dice. So that's 2 successes. So you succeeded because you've got 1. You can then use the second success to jump over to add to momentum for the players. But there is going to be a complication there. So you might say that the gun goes off, but it jams. The weapon overheats. You know, they might slip over. So you're not saying with a complication and a success that what they've done doesn't happen, but something bad is going to happen. Obviously, if they fail with a complication as well, then it's going to be a little bit more negative. But what the Games Master can do is make the complication range larger. So look at this table down here. Let's say you're going to make it difficulty 3. Instead of being a complication on a 20, it might go all the way down to an 18. So there's suddenly a 15% chance instead of a 20% chance of a complication. More often than not, the players will get complications when they're wounded, which I'll come on to once we get to the combat section. There is one other sort of meta currency in the game, and that is fortune. This is harder to get because you just get fortune at the start of an adventure. And you get 3 of them, and you can spend this for things like getting a critical success, re-rolling dice, or doing an additional major action. So that is a major action. Again, we'll come on to the actions, but that might, you might be able to shoot for a second time in a round, or, you might be able to avoid defeat as well. So the Games Master mechanic is threat. As the Games Master builds threat, they can then spend their money to roll different dice, roll additional dice, or they can increase difficulties on rolls. So the player's got momentum, Games Master's got threat, and the maximum threat, I think, is 12. I think it goes to that the Games Master can build up to. Chapter 4 is action. So this is just sort of moving around, how areas work, combat, things like that. The game uses environments and zones. So you're looking at, I think was it 5 different areas effect. So as you're moving around, so I think we're all used to the idea of 30 feet, how far a player can go or whatever it may be. But basically, with this, we're going to be looking at zones. And a zone normally might be a room, but a larger room or a field might be divided into zones. And depending on how many zones away, will increase things like the difficulty to hit, how far players can move, and also distances. Reach is 2 people next to each other, because you can reach them to touch them. We've then got close, which is in the same zone. We've then got medium, which is 1 zone away. Long, 2 zones away. Extreme, everything else. Okay, so it's quite abstract. It makes for a very pulpy, quick movement. And on a player's turn, they can do a variety of things. But before we get into what players can do on their turn, we need to do initiative order. Now, initiative order is players go first, and then the games master goes, then the player picks characters, then the games masters, then the player pick a character, and you keep going backwards and forwards right until the point that someone runs out, and then whoever's left just carries on going. However, the games master might go, nah, I'm going first this time, which they have to spend some of their threat to jump in to take over. But also you might want to keep the initiative as opposed to going to the alternatives. And if you want to do that again, the player's going to spend momentum, or the games master is going to spend threat, so it doesn't go backwards and forwards. We then get into turns. On the turns, we've got minor actions and major actions and free actions. So minor actions are things like aim, which means you can re-roll a d20, draw an item. Movement allows you to move to any point within medium range, so you can go into the next zone, and you can stand where you want within that zone, either next to someone within reach, or you can have a distance, or you might be able to prepare something. Major actions are just how they sound, and you can get one of these per turn, and you can assist to help out with a dice roll, cast a spell, attack, catch your breath. This is a way of sort of taking an action out and sort of just healing up some of your stress points. Create a truth, which again is going to create a keyword for that scene that will make rolls either easier or harder. And then it's got some examples here of some free actions that the players can do. Making attacks is nice and simple in the game. Depending on whether it's a melee attack or a ranged attack, you'll either do agility fighting for melee or coordination fighting for range. And you're looking to beat the number of successes against your opponent in melee, or just get one success or more, depending on the range, for the coordination or ranged attack. Assuming you hit, you'll then pick up a number of challenge dice, which are the d6. And then you will roll those dice, and depend on the face of the dice, will you do some damage. There are some things they can offset. So, for example, if they're wearing armor, or they've got mental or physical toughness, which all players will have, it will reduce the amount of damage. From an injuries point of view, once a player gets to 3 injuries, whether it's physical or mental, potentially they're going to be dying. So if they've got more physical injuries than mental injuries, they're going to go into death rolls. And from an injury point of view, when you are taking stress damage, it's exactly the same. So you've got a certain amount of stress. So on this table here, this player's got, what's that? So he's got 9 stress boxes available on this chart. And that basically means they can take up to 9 damage. And once they go beyond that, they will then start taking wounds. The only exception to that is if you take more than 5 stress in one hit, you again will take another wound. So if you've got 6, let's say you've got 6 boxes filled, and then you take 5 and complete this, you sadly will end up taking 2 injuries at the same time. Different weapons and different range will have certain effects, and also some attributes will have an effect on bonus damage as well. And that again will depend on whether it's different attributes for whether it's a ranged attack or melee attack. Mental attacks, this is normally through spells or through some of the NPCs that will do a different type of attack. So this will be obviously attacking the mind. However, any damage that goes through still, I'll just scroll back a second, will still go into the same boxes as well. Okay, so whether it's physical or mental, all of it counts as stress. They're added together, they're not recorded separately. Once you run out of stress, you're into marking injuries. And so as you then mark the injuries, you will then your complication range grows larger. As you manage to stabilize and don't die, you might find your injuries become scars. And if they do become scars, these again are additional truths. So this is something that will affect the characters, actually all of them, pretty much long term, and are very difficult to heal. And they are again broken down into whether they be physical scars or mental scars. Okay, that's it. That is the game mechanic in a nutshell. And then, so now what we're going to do is create a character. So character creation is nice and easy, and it's sort of broken down into several easy steps. But what we need to do is look at the starting attributes and skills. Okay, and then you're going to pick an archetype from there, the nationality you're from, and then your background, a special characteristic, and then you've got some sort of finishing touches here. Starting attributes, we've got 6 attributes in this game: agility, brawn, coordination, insight, reason, and will. All of those will start at 6. Remember, to do a roll, you're going to add, well, the games master will pick the attribute and the skill. You're going to add those together. So if you had no skill in anything else, you're looking to roll a 6 or lower all the time, okay? But you're going to get more than that, don't worry. As you create your character, you will get more bonuses to attributes and skills, okay? Your archetype's going to give you a chunk load, as well as some focuses and some talents. I'll talk about focuses when we get there. Your nationality doesn't really have any effect on anything other than some languages that go there. Background, which will again add some additional attributes and skills and focuses and characteristics. So there's a lot to be added. As a general rule, once you get to the end of the character creation, your attributes shouldn't exceed 11. Was it 12? I think they might be able to just be able to get to 12, and skills won't exceed 5. So building your character, say we're down to 6 basic attributes. Actually, let's just have a quick look at the character sheet here. So you've got your name, nationality, rank, archetype, which is your role in the game, background, what you did before you started adventuring, the specific characteristic and bonus, any personal truths or scars go into here, your injuries in the box, courage, armor, and fortune, and then we've got the skills down here, and then your attributes here, as well as any sort of bonus damage dice that you're going to get off it. But agility is like dexterity, but this is a mixture of speed, balance, and muscles, but doesn't include firearms. Firearms in this game is basically going off coordination or perception, technically. Then we've got brawn. Brawn is used to determine melee attacks, bonus damage, and then the amount of physical damage you can take. Insight is more perception, sort of, and instincts in here. Reason is logic and intelligence, and then will is self. Depending on the type of cast of the players, if you want to be one, they will either use insight, reason, or will. It depends on the 3 different types of casting, which we'll get onto with the really cool magic section when we get there. Say skills are going to range from 0 to 5. Like I said, skills are going to range from 0 to 5, and you're just going to be adding them to your attributes. And it just breaks down all the skills in here, but you'll see under the skills, we've got focus. So I'm just going to pick on fighting. Let's go aggressive, because we're going to be fighting at some stage. So fighting, as it sounds, this skills covers a character's ability to fight and defend themselves. And a focus is a special ability that you've got within that. So remember when we talked about the D20? Roll a D20, looking to get it under your attribute and skill. And if you get a 1, you get a critical. However, what focus does is it opens up the range of that critical. So let's say we've got a fighting of 3. And I'm going to pick, as a focus, close quarter, which basically covers the use of shotguns, submachine guns, similar design for close range within tight confines like trenches or buildings. Now I'm going to shoot someone in a trench, close confined, so I'm going to roll all the d20, normally 2 as we say, and a 1 will get me a critical. It won't with this, because I'll say to the games master, I've got the close quarter focus, and he'll go, okay. So that basically means we'll extend the crit range to 3. Because my skill is 3 in fighting, I'm applying the close quarter focus, so as opposed to a 1 on a crit, it's 3. So that means I've now got a 15% chance of a critical with each of the die, as opposed to a 5%. And all the skills will have different focuses, and players will be picking focuses for them. Truths and scars we've talked about. Talents, this is just feats, features. These are special abilities, powers that may require rolling, may require activation, or something that's permanently on that may allow things like re-rolling of skills. These are just sort of game-breaking feats, focuses, special powers. Okay, we'll have a look at a couple of examples when we get into them as well. Now, archetypes. This is what you currently do now, and there are 8 archetypes in the game, from Boffin, Commander, Con Artist, Grease Monkey, Infiltrator, Investigator, Occultist, or Soldier. Okay, and what we'll do is let's just pick on the Boffin, which is an English word here for, technically you'd be looking nerd, scientist, that sort of thing. So as you'll see, it gives a brief description here into the Boffin. Your bonus to attributes, I think all of them have got +2 in 2, +1 in 2. Then we've got some pluses to skills here. Any 2 focuses that you can pick from engineering, medicine, and vehicles. And then we're going to choose 1 talent from the 3 talents that are down below. Again, special abilities or powers. And it will give you some certain belongings. Commander, your charismatic leader. I like this bit as well. So play the commander if you want to. Be the leader of the group. Give orders to assist others. Lead the charge. Use daring tactics. And all of them got, so we've got con artist, your charismatic face of the party, grease monkey, your mechanic, infiltrator, your stealthy ninja type, investigator, as they're going to discover the truths no matter what goes on, occultist, your magic user, and then soldier. Yet sort of, I like this, be the strongest in the group, possibly, depending on the backgrounds everyone else takes. Obviously, from the nationality point of view, you're going to be fighting on the side of the Allied. And again, you can roll where you come from or pick it. And the only real difference here is it is going to give you different starting languages to pick from. Backgrounds, we can again roll your backgrounds. This is what you did before you joined the war. And it can be anything from academic, Air Force, entertainer. It doesn't actually have to match either. So if you do want to be... we'll just pick the occultist for argument's sake. So you want to be a spell user. It doesn't mean that you had to have been a spell background. You could be a driver. It's actually the more varied that you're going to get, the more rounded your characters will be. And like your archetype, we'll just pick on Air Force here. So here we go. We're going to get a bunch of new attributes, some more skills, some more focuses to pick from, some talents to go through, and some truths, as well as some additional belongings. So this is just fleshing out the characters, adding to more. And then we've got a D20 roll here for a random characteristic that is it's kind of what your player likes, what the player characters like doing, hobby, mental belief, if that makes sense, in the way they are. So again, if they're sort of nomadic by nature, you once had a home, but now your home is the road. Again, a couple more attributes here, some skills, some more talents and truths. So we're just fleshing out the characters in lots of different ways. And then finally, you're just going to add everything together. You're going to have at least 4 truths. Add it all to the character sheet. Here you go. Attributes can't be any higher than 11. So I had kind of 11 in my head. I think I may have said 11 or 12. Skills here, again, maximum are a 5. Then you've got some focuses in here. So you have 4 focuses, 2 from archetype, 2 from your background, and then your talents in here. If you're going to use magic, then you will have had to pick the spellcaster feat to learn magic. And we've got 3 different types of mage and 3 different types of spell schools. Okay. So if you want to go traditional, the traditional magic user is exactly how it sounds. They are a traditional magic user. They've known about spells and spellcasting most of their life, and they will pick either rune weaving, which is Scandinavian Norse magic based on runes. They will pick druidism, which is based on Celtic, or they will go with the psychic, which is more mind magic. Okay, that's your traditional route, and they will pick one of those. If you want to access the spells of any of them, you can go dabbler or research. Okay, dabbler is how it sounds. They've kind of just stumbled across a couple of spells. They will have access to less spells, but from across the range. But they're not very powerful because they know a little bit about spells, but they kind of cast spells with flaws, and it's more prone to going wrong. But they can up the power a little bit more than a traditional magic user. So it's kind of like the sorcerer in that way, that from 5th edition, where they know about spells. It's like this innate ability that they manage to stumble across, but they're not in full control of the spells. Or you can go the researcher, again, can pick any from all 3, but they've just studied a few books, so they've got, again, less spells to pick from. Okay, so you can either have 1 school and a few more spells, or you're going into less, picking from all 3 schools, but less spells, but potentially more powerful, but it could go wrong, or the safer route, which is the researcher. All spells as well are going to cost stress potential for stress to come from the player characters. So as much as magic is known, it's obviously very, very sort of hidden, and it's only been around for sort of like 3 or 4 years, well, depending on when you actually set the adventure. Because if you think the Nazis have had it for a while, the Allied are reacting to it and slowly learning it. Hence the reason, while the British forces tend to they get into the rune magic or the druidic magic, and the American forces have the psychic. Okay, so that's the newer one. Okay, so that's really how it works. So let's say we've got a couple of bonus dice depending on, so we're going to have some bonus dice for your brawn for melee attacks, based on your insight for ranged attacks, and then based on the mental spell for will for magic as well. Okay, and then finally you just have your character sheet, work out your personal belongings, give yourself a name, and you are away. Achtung Cthulhu isn't a level based game, it is experience based, and as the player characters go out and adventure, kill things, complete missions, they will gain experience for doing so. There's also actually a chance to gain medals, which will give larger experience points, but this section here just details where you can spend experience and what you can spend it on. And as you gain more experience, you're then just going to gain additional ranks depending on whether you're in the Army, Navy, Air Force, US Navy, etc. in here. Okay, doesn't seem to be any sort of mechanical aspect to this, or talks about ranks for player characters being of certain ranks and giving each other's orders, but I would allow players of higher ranks to outrank them. So we've got the experience tables here for medals as well. Chapter 6 covers talents or feats or features, and it's a nice handy table here, breaking down the talents by keyword, whether it's academics, athletics, and just breaks them down. But so yeah, as you go through, we've got common talents, academics, athletics, engineering. I'm just going to pick on, let's observation. Let's just go on a ramsack. So this has got the keyword observation in here, which is the skill that it's associated with. So you know what time it is in essence, and your searches are thorough. Is somewhat messy. When you attempt an observation test in a search area, you may generate 2 threat to reduce the difficulty of the test by 1 and reduce the time the search takes. So I said these are game sort of rule breaking mechanics in here for all of them. And yeah, there's a lot to pick from, which is really good. And even covers things like vehicles if you want to get into vehicle combat and gunnery. And then finally, we've got these sort of weird ones as well, which are more sort of aimed at the mythical character. Tools of the trade is obviously your equipment section. And going into this, it gives all the weapons in here. So it covers things like range, focus, stress effects, and bonuses to damage. So do you remember when we talked about the dice? The stress dice has got that little symbol on it, which effectively replaces the 5 and 6 if you don't buy the official die. But it just means when you roll them, it could trigger an additional effect. And these are things like that in here. So they may be covered things like drain, persistence, piercing, so just to ignore armor. And then when we get into the equipment, it does the thing that I talk about this a lot. I don't overly like restrictions based on ratings for players to requisition equipment. However, this is a war game. You can't go and just buy items or guns. You're going to have to request it and have to be certain ranks to be able to actually take that into your combat situations. And the book will take you through melee weapons, exotic melee weapons, handguns, explosive rifles, shotguns. This is all for the allied stuff. And then it comes to, we've got a whole section on, where is it? Well, I'm going to get to it in a second when we get to the German stuff. And the funny thing about the German military equipment is there is no requisition cost on here, because you're getting that by killing Germans or capturing them. You don't have to kill every German you meet. But I'll just go back a second. I just thought that was quite funny that there was obviously no cost in there, but it does say it covers it: grenades, bombs, exotic weapons as well. And then we've got other things: personal possessions, so thieves kits, burglar toolkits, demolition kits, etc. So all the things that the players are going to want to sort of say requisition to go out on the mission. The one thing that isn't in here, there's no sort of images of any of the weapons, which is a shame, but we are starting to see this more and more now in books where, equipment tables. I think it's gone are the days of here's a page of image of all the weapons, and obviously it's harder with the books with a lot of different weapons in here. But yeah, I'm kind of used to it now, but it does seem to cover most of the weapons from the Second World War for both the Allied and the German sides. We've then got a section here on vehicles, which is very in-depth, actually. I was quite surprised just how much additional stuff that we're going to have to take on board for operating the vehicles, vehicular movement, sort of out of control tables, which you like, but stuff like sudden stops, ramming, repairing the vehicles, and vehicle stress is all in here. There's a little bit more imagery in here, and it does cover both the UK Commonwealth vehicles, Allied vehicles, the American vehicles, as well as the Germans, BMWs. It's always weird, isn't it, reading sort of BMWs and Mercedes, which is now a sort of staple of so many families in the Western world. And well, they would come out, they built out of war. And I don't know why I have a fondness for the Tiger tank. It was obviously quite a dangerous tank, but actually I didn't know as much about it, because this is going on about how difficult it was to produce and how incredibly unreliable it was. But war films, watching lots of war films with my dad, it was like, here comes the Tiger tank, and my dad was always like, now we're in trouble, because I think it was like one of the strongest, sturdiest tanks to destroy. So that is equipment and weapons and vehicles, which is always really handy to have. Then we've got chapter 9, which is magic. I've pretty much covered the magic section when we were talking about it, but this just does flesh out, how to cast the spells. And casting the spells is going to work exactly the same way as attacking with any sort of firearms or fists. You're obviously going to pick the relevant attribute. You're going to roll. You're going to have to achieve a certain difficulty number. The only thing you're going to have to do beforehand, though, is the players, because there's two types of spells. We've got battlefield magic, and then we've got ritual magic. Okay, so battlefield magic is, as it sounds, it's magic that a individual can take to the battlefield. But what they need to do is prep it beforehand, and they prep it into what's called their mantle. And their mantle is, so it's going to be a magical item that will they cast from, bond from, something like that. Be a wand, staff, it could be a shield, whatever the player wants to come up with. And players will be able to hold several spells in their mantle at one time. So don't worry, it's not, just prepare one spell and then you're done. So it just breaks it down into a little bit more information here than how to cast the spells. I'm going to just go over and over the same details, but let's pick. So we've got the Celtic spell book. So let's just pick on, I don't know. Let's let Ogham sign over here. So we've got the skill that's related to it. So you're rolling for the difficulty, how many successes you need. This is a drain cost, so it's going to roll 5 dice. So this could actually hurt the player quite badly, and it's going to do piercing and draining damage as well. And then it's just got the effect here, and if they want to spend momentum on it, they can actually increase the intense or the stun effect of it. And all the spells are going to be like this. I say it's not very well known, the spells. They are very, very strong, but equally could end up killing the caster themselves. And then we've got the runic magic, which you can see the names here: Curse of Loki, Hammer of Thor. So this is your sort of runes, sort of Norse spells. And then the American sort of created one here, which is psychic and ESP. So this is all sort of mind control, things like telekinesis and telepathy as well. And if the players want to learn a new spell, you can. So you're not kind of stuck with the starting spells. But I think it's about 3, 2, and then 1, depending on the schools. You're not actually starting with a lot of spells. And then finally, we've got the really powerful ritual magic. Oh, the spell section does talk about, this is the player's guide. As more expansions come out, different spell schools will become available. And because in the ritualistic magic, which is, these take a lot longer, they need more than one person to cast, there's only 3 in here. So I think we're going to see more and more, well, in the book tells you we're going to see more and more sort of battlefield and ritual spells as time goes on. And then finally, we've got the March of History just before we get into the NPCs. Now, this is a condensed version, pretty much country by country, of the Second World War and going into it. So we've got here what happens in sort of Great Britain, what happens from the United States, Germany, British intelligence, and then through US intelligence and German intelligence. So it just gives a bit of sort of background into the Second World War for the players, and the Games Master as well, and then the French Resistance as well. And then a few supporting roles in here. And then finally, chapter 11, before we close the book, is just some example characters of British forces, US forces, and finally some animals. And as ever, that brings us to the end of the book. I think you can tell I really like it. I'm going to start with a couple of things I don't overly like. So the initiative is it's quick and simple. The player characters always go first. The games master then goes, and you go backwards and forwards, and you can spend momentum. Or you could just have your static initiative, and everyone goes in initiative order. It's really up to you as to how you want to sort of homebrew the initiative. Run it rules as read. It is quicker that way than everyone working off the static initiative, which I think Fallout does the sort of static initiative now. So yeah, and the range is good because it's nice and quick and very pulpy because it allows the players to do stuff. But there is the really, really strange bit, especially if you're going to run it off a BTT, where you can be in two different zones and next to each other to touch. When I have this situation, if they're in separate zones and someone's foolish enough to stand on the edge of a zone and someone can stand next to it, I still allow that to be counted as reach, because I kind of think it's a little bit more sensible. But that's really up to you. I'd say it runs really fast, the way the combats work. Now, I know people, and I see this on other reviews as well, people don't always necessarily like meta currencies. I think if you're not a meta currency person, this possibly isn't going to be for you, because the meta currencies and fortune, so momentum, fortune, and threat, are three of the really big things that it just generates this wonderful amount of teamwork. Because what you end up doing is, whenever you do a die roll, you're like, well, actually, can I spend an additional point momentum, because it might be an easy roll, but you're going to want to potentially take 3 or 4 die, because if you're more chance of succeeding with additional successes, then it's going to create momentum to go on to the next player. And you do have this wonderful thing where you're all interested in and invested in what the player's doing, because you also want to be able to spend momentum on your turn, so you don't want them to spend too much. But when they do succeed really well, you're sort of cheering, and trying to get to use your focus a lot is always important, because it just increases that range of your critical chance as well. Theoretically, you could have a focus and a skill up to 5, so you've got 25% chance of critting on dice, which does make for exceptionally fun and great pulp experience. Now, if you want a really serious Second World War, gritty, Cthulhu-esque thing, I think you could work this in here, but I wouldn't. I would just play this the way it's written. It's designed to be fun. It's designed for the players to do some pretty good stuff on their goes. They are going to be more powerful than your standard soldier. The spells are very, very powerful, but you're going to have to mitigate how often you use them, and make sure that you protect and keep that magic user alive, because there's a good chance he's just going to fry his own mind. The critical wounds and scars tables really build a good background into your character, because you're going to have all these keywords over time that will have come from genuine fun game experiences. Because sometimes when you get critical injuries and players go, well, it doesn't, because when you play Warhammer Fantasy and people do things like lose arms and stuff, you do learn to adapt your character to that, and this is going to happen in this. Some of those critical wounds, you can become an amputee, and you're going to want to keep playing your character, because you've got all this wonderful stuff that's invested, the other keywords, the experience that you've generated, medals, the honor system that you will have with the rest of your party. It's just a wonderful take on the Second World War. And some of the adventures I've written, I don't normally get into reviewing adventures as yet, but the adventure in the start set is really good. And a good place to start for the characters. Glad I picked this up. I really do think the 2d20 system is an incredibly good system. The one thing I will say, having played this a few times now, and other d20 systems, you need a very good games master that really understands the rules, that really understands the difference between momentum and threat, when to use it, because one thing a bad games master can do is not spend stuff well, or potentially spend it at the wrong time. Because you still want the players to succeed, you still want them to do well, but you still want to put that threat against them to make things seem difficult or a challenge. But make sure you spread it around, because you could easily end up just picking a one player, or making one player feel picked on, if as a games master, you're spending that threat predominantly against one character. But other than that, I'd say the book is incredibly well laid out. It's beautiful to look at. The artwork is great. I love the use of the greens in here. I don't think I can think of many rule books that have the amount of green in the backgrounds and the borders and stuff. And I'm really interested to see where this builds. I want more spells as time goes on, different spell schools, more equipment is always going to be helpful. One of the sort of themes that I've got, for this world and the way I think it's going to work, or especially the way I'm going to envision it as I'm running it, is very much sort of Captain America versus Red Skull. That was the first Captain America film, wasn't it, with Hugo Weaving? Because I kind of get that vibe that you're kind of fighting against Hydra. I know it's not Hydra, and it's the Black Sun, I think it's called. Can't quite remember now. But yeah, it's just an absolutely wonderful world with lots of lore. There's so many more books for me to look at and to read. I say I'm just really excited to see where this is building, and I can't wait to get into the Games Master's Guide, read that through again, and then I will follow it up with a video on the Games Master's Guide. So I'm also going to do the starter set at some stage. If this is the sort of thing you like, please do consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.